Hi everyone, I am Mia again. When we talk about trauma, most people think of dramatic events, accidents, natural disasters, or sudden loss. But there is another kind of trauma quieter, subtler, and often overlooked. This is the trauma that begins in childhood, when the world is meant to feel safe, when our minds are learning how to love, trust, and belong. Psychologists call this inner child trauma. The inner child is not just a metaphor. It is a real psychological presence within us. It is the part of ourselves that stores early experiences, emotions, and beliefs, particularly those formed when we were small, vulnerable, and learning how the world works. When a child experiences consistent pain, fear, or neglect, these early wounds become inner child trauma. Imagine a child in a school playground, standing at the edge, watching other children laugh and play while feeling invisible, rejected, or mocked. Or picture a child at home asking for comfort after a nightmare, only to be told to stop crying. These moments, seemingly small, are the bricks that can form walls around a child's sense of safety, self-worth, and belonging. Inner child trauma doesn't always leave visible scars, but it shapes our emotions, beliefs, and behaviors well into adulthood. It whispers messages like, "I'm not enough," "I don't deserve love," or "I have to be perfect to be safe." And unless we recognize and care for this inner child, these patterns repeat, quietly influencing every decision, every relationship, every thought about ourselves. In this series, we will go deeper. We will explore the reasons behind inner child trauma, why it happens, the environments and experiences that create it, and the psychological mechanisms that store these early wounds. We will look at how bullying, neglect, loss, and societal pressures shape the inner child, and how these wounds echo throughout our lives. Understanding the inner child is the first step toward healing. By shining a light on these hidden patterns, we can begin to see the child within, acknowledge their pain, and learn how to nurture and protect the part of ourselves that has always needed care. So take a deep breath, settle in, and let's step into this journey together, a journey into the inner child, into the roots of trauma, and toward the possibility of profound understanding and healing. Part 1. Childhood. Shadow's childhood is meant to be a time of exploration, joy, and safety. But for many, it is also a time when invisible wounds take root. Today, we're going to explore one of the most powerful sources of lifelong psychological struggle, inner child trauma. Imagine a child in a classroom, shy and quiet, sitting in the back. Perhaps another child pushes them, calls them names, or excludes them from a game. These experiences might seem small on the surface, but repeated exposure to school bullying can create profound emotional wounds. Psychologists explain that bullying teaches a child fear, mistrust, and self-doubt. Over time, the child internalizes these experiences and begins to believe, unconsciously, that they are not worthy of love or acceptance. Now, let's step into a different scenario. The home. Not every household is nurturing, even if it appears functional. A parent who dismisses feelings, scolds a child for crying, or fails to provide consistent emotional support engages in what experts call emotional neglect. Unlike overt abuse, neglect doesn't leave visible marks. Yet its impact is profound. Children learn to suppress their emotions, doubt their worth, and disconnect from their own needs. This is one of the clearest pathways to inner child trauma. Consider the interplay between bullying and improper parenting. A child who is rejected at school and dismissed at home learns that the world is unsafe, and that they cannot rely on others for support. This combination often leads to chronic anxiety, low self-esteem, and social withdrawal, even decades later. It is not the result of personal failure, but the natural outcome of unmet emotional needs and repeated stress during development. But trauma doesn't only manifest externally. It lives inside the child as persistent thoughts, emotions, and patterns of behavior. Children who experience trauma may develop hypervigilance, an exaggerated sensitivity to threats, or self-blame, believing that they caused the pain or rejection. These are survival strategies, adaptations designed to protect the child in unsafe environments. Unfortunately, when the child grows into adulthood, these same strategies often create challenges in relationships, work, and personal well-being. Let's make this concrete with an example. Imagine a 10-year-old child who is consistently bullied at school and corrected harshly at home. At school, they avoid attention to prevent ridicule. At home, they suppress emotions to avoid scolding. Over time, this child may appear quiet and compliant, but internally they may feel fear, loneliness, and self-doubt. These feelings, if unaddressed, become the blueprint for adult behavior, a tendency to avoid conflict, difficulty trusting others, or chronic feelings of inadequacy. The inner child, then, is not a metaphor, it is a living archive of these experiences. It stores memories, emotions, and beliefs that influence us long after childhood ends. Understanding the inner child is crucial because healing begins with recognizing these stored patterns and giving them voice in a safe and supportive way. Asterisk, in this series, we'll explore the major causes of inner child trauma, bullying, emotional neglect, improper parenting, witnessing violence, loss, and societal pressures. We'll also examine the long-term psychological effects, from anxiety and depression to attachment challenges and self-sabotaging behaviors. Finally, we'll explore tools and practices to nurture, heal, and reconnect with the inner child, turning past pain into a source of growth and resilience. To summarize today, inner child trauma arises from early experiences where a child's emotional needs are unmet or their sense of safety is compromised. Bullying and emotional neglect are two of the most common contributors. The trauma is stored in the mind and body, influencing behavior and emotions into adulthood. Recognizing these patterns is the first step toward healing a journey we will explore in depth throughout this series. In the next episode, we'll take a closer look at the various types of bullying and how they uniquely impact the developing child, with examples and insights from psychology research. Understanding these patterns can help us not only recognize our own inner child wounds, but also prevent trauma for the next generation. Part 2. Causes of inner child trauma. In the first episode, we introduce the concept of the inner child and how early experiences can create lasting emotional patterns. Today, we will explore the primary causes of inner child trauma, examining the environments, interactions, and experiences that shape a child's developing sense of self. Children are remarkably resilient, yet they are also incredibly sensitive to their surroundings. Their brains, still forming, interpret social interactions, parental responses, and peer behavior as signals about the world and their place in it. When these signals consistently indicate danger, rejection, or neglect, trauma takes root. 1. School bullying. One of the most common sources of inner child trauma is bullying. This can take many forms: physical aggression, verbal harassment, social exclusion, or increasingly, cyberbull. Imagine a child who dreads walking into school because of the fear of ridicule. Perhaps classmates taunt them for being different, push them into corners, or deliberately leave them out of games. While these moments may seem isolated, research shows that repeated exposure to bullying can cause chronic stress, hypervigilance, and feelings of worthlessness. Psychologically, children internalize these experiences. They begin to ask themselves questions like, "Am I the problem?" Or "Why doesn't anyone like me?" These thoughts become part of the child's inner narrative, forming the foundation of self-doubt that can persist into adulthood. Asterisk, even when bullying stops, the emotional imprint remains. The child may develop social anxiety, fear of conflict, or reluctance to express themselves authentically. Bullying is not just a childhood inconvenience, it is a formative force that shapes emotional development. 2. Improper parenting and emotional neglect. The second major contributor is improper parenting, particularly in the form of emotional neglect. Unlike abuse, neglect often goes unnoticed, because it is the absence of something rather than the presence of harm. A parent may provide food and shelter but fail to validate emotions, offer comfort, or provide consistent support. For example, a child who shares an exciting accomplishment might hear, "That's nice," without enthusiasm or encouragement. Or a child who comes home crying after a difficult day may be told, "Stop crying, it's not a big deal." These experiences teach the child that their feelings are irrelevant or burdensome. Over time, this can lead to internalized shame, suppressed emotions, and a sense of unworthiness. Emotional neglect is particularly insidious because it occurs in the context of love. The child believes they are loved, yet the core emotional needs remain unmet. Attachment theory explains this well. Children who experience emotional neglect often develop insecure attachment styles, carrying patterns of distrust, anxiety, or avoidance into adult relationships. The inner child grows up feeling unseen, unheard, and unvalued, even when the outer circumstances seem stable. Three, witnessing violence or trauma. Another significant cause of inner child trauma is witnessing violence, whether in the home, community, or even through media exposure. Children exposed to domestic violence, aggression between caregivers, or chronic household conflict often feel powerless, even if the child is not the direct target. The emotional impact is profound. They may develop heightened anxiety, hypervigilance, and an exaggerated sense of responsibility, believing that if they behave perfectly, they can prevent the violence. Studies show that such exposure can affect brain development, particularly in areas that regulate stress and emotional processing. The child may internalize the belief that the world is unsafe and that relationships are inherently unpredictable or threatening. These lessons, learned early, shape adult behavior in subtle but powerful ways. 4. Loss, abandonment, or separation loss is another powerful source of inner child trauma. This could be the death of a parent, sibling, or caregiver, or experiences of abandonment like prolonged separation. Due to divorce or foster care placement, children are biologically wired to depend on attachment figures for safety and security. Losing this figure suddenly or repeatedly triggers intense emotional stress. The child may experience grief, fear, and deep insecurity, learning that the people they rely on may disappear. Over time, these experiences can form a persistent sense of instability and mistrust, influencing adult relationships and the ability to form secure attachments. The inner child develops a protective shell, often resulting in avoidance, hyperindependence, or difficulty expressing vulnerability. 5. Cultural, societal, and environmental pressures *. Finally, it's important to consider external pressures beyond home or school. Societal expectations, cultural norms, discrimination, and systemic inequities can all create environments that traumatize the child. For instance, a child growing up in an environment that devalues their identity, whether through racism, ableism, or rigid gender expectations, may internalize a sense of inferiority or shame. Similarly, poverty, chronic instability, or unsafe neighborhoods teach the child that the world is unpredictable and dangerous. These pressures may not always be recognized as trauma by the child or adults, yet they contribute to the development of inner child wounds. To summarize, the causes of inner child trauma are varied but interconnected. 1. Bullying at school creates fear, self-doubt, and social anxiety. 2. Improper parenting and emotional neglect teach children that their feelings don't matter. 3. Witnessing violence or trauma fosters hypervigilance and mistrust. 4. Loss. Abandonment or separation leads to insecurity and emotional withdrawal. 5. Cultural and societal pressures can instill shame, inferiority, and a sense of instability. Each of these experiences may seem separate, but they share a common thread. They disrupt the child's sense of safety, worth, and belonging. The inner child stores these experiences, shaping patterns of thought, emotion, and behavior that often persist into adulthood. Understanding these causes is the first step toward healing. By identifying the sources of trauma, we can begin to recognize the impact on ourselves or others and take steps to nurture the inner child toward safety, validation, and growth. In the next episode, we will explore the long-term psychological effects of inner child trauma, examining how these early experiences shape adult behavior, relationships, and emotional well-being. By understanding these patterns, we can learn to break cycles of pain and build pathways toward resilience and self-compassion. Part 3. Long-term effects of inner child trauma. In our previous episodes, we explored what the inner child is and the main causes of inner child trauma: bullying, emotional neglect, witnessing violence, loss, and societal pressures. Today, we turn our attention to the long-term effects, how these early experiences can shape the adult mind, behavior, and emotional life. Childhood trauma is not just a memory. It leaves traces in the brain, the nervous system, and the very patterns of thought that guide our daily lives. These are often invisible, but they manifest in behaviors, emotional responses, and relationships long after the original experiences have passed. 1. Emotional consequences. One of the most profound effects is emotional dysregulation. Adults who experienced inner child trauma may feel emotions more intensely, or conversely, may struggle to feel at all. They may be easily overwhelmed by anxiety, sadness, or anger, or find themselves numb and disconnected. Consider the person who experienced repeated bullying as a child. They may carry an underlying fear of judgment that triggers anxiety in social situations. Or someone who endured emotional neglect may struggle to identify or express their feelings, leaving them frustrated or isolated. These patterns are not weaknesses, they are the nervous system's way of protecting a vulnerable child. 2. Cognitive patterns. Inner child trauma also shapes the way we think. Common patterns include negative self-beliefs, self-criticism, and perfectionism. A child who is repeatedly dismissed or criticized may internalize the idea that I am not enough. These beliefs often operate unconsciously. Adults may find themselves sabotaging opportunities, avoiding challenges, or seeking constant validation from others. Cognitive patterns formed in childhood can create a persistent loop. The inner child remembers rejection or neglect. The adult interprets new experiences through that lens, and the cycle continues. 3. Relationship challenges. Perhaps one of the most visible consequences of inner child trauma is its impact on relationships. Attachment patterns formed in childhood, whether secure, anxious, or avoidant, shape how we connect with others as adults. Adults who experience neglect may struggle to trust others or to feel worthy of love. Those who witnessed violence may either avoid intimacy or gravitate toward conflict. Bullying survivors may fear confrontation, criticism, or emotional vulnerability. These challenges are not personal failings. They are learned survival strategies. Recognizing these patterns is the first step toward consciously forming healthier relationships. 4. Behavioral patterns and coping mechanisms. Many adults cope with unresolved inner child trauma through behaviors that provide temporary relief but can be harmful over time. Common patterns include avoidance, withdrawing from situations that feel emotionally risky; perfectionism, attempting to earn approval that was withheld in childhood; people-pleasing, prioritizing others' needs to feel valued; substance use or compulsive behaviors, numbing difficult emotions. These behaviors are not arbitrary, they are attempts to survive emotionally. They make sense when viewed through the lens of childhood experience. Understanding this connection can transform self-judgment into compassion. 5. Physical and health impacts. Trauma does not only affect the mind. Research increasingly shows that early childhood trauma can influence physical health. Chronic stress during development affects the immune system, hormone regulation, and even brain structure. Adults who experience inner child trauma may experience heightened stress responses and difficulty relaxing, sleep disturbances, gastrointestinal or cardiovascular issues, increased vulnerability to anxiety or depression. These physical manifestations are the body's way of storing and signaling unresolved trauma. They remind us that healing must address both mind and body. 6. Self-perception and life choices. Finally, inner child trauma shapes the way we see ourselves and make life choices. Adults may struggle with low self-esteem and feelings of unworthiness, chronic self-doubt or fear of failure, difficulty setting boundaries or asserting needs, a sense of being stuck, repeating old patterns of behavior. Yet, these effects, while challenging, are not permanent. By understanding the origin of these patterns, adults can begin to rewrite their narrative, acknowledging the wounded inner child, validating their experiences, and gradually forming new, healthier emotional habits. To summarize, inner child trauma can manifest in multiple ways in adulthood. 1. Emotional consequences, dysregulation, numbness, or heightened sensitivity. 2. Cognitive patterns, negative self-beliefs, self-criticism, perfectionism. 3. Relationship challenges, difficulty trusting, forming intimacy, or managing conflict. 4. Behavioral coping, avoidance, people-pleasing, or self-numbing behaviors. 5. Physical impacts, stress-related health issues. 6. Self-perception and life choices, low self-esteem, repeated patterns, fear of failure. Recognizing these patterns is empowering. Understanding the inner child's influence allows adults to separate past experiences from present reality and to choose healthier ways of thinking, feeling, and acting. In our next episode, we will explore practical strategies for healing the inner child. From mindfulness and journaling to therapy approaches like inner child work and EMDR, we will discuss ways to nurture the wounded parts of ourselves and reclaim emotional safety, self-worth, and resilience. Part 4. Healing the inner child. The inner child, though wounded, is resilient. And the good news is that adults can reconnect with this part of themselves, acknowledge its needs, and gradually restore emotional safety, self-worth, and trust. Healing is not a single event. It is a journey, a series of conscious, intentional steps toward recognizing, validating, and nurturing the child within. One, recognizing the inner child. The first step in healing is awareness. Many adults are unaware that their fears, self-criticism, or relational patterns originate in childhood experiences. Take a moment to reflect. When do you feel most anxious, self-doubting, or reactive? Often, these responses are echoes of the inner child. Psychologists suggest simple exercises, such as journaling or self-reflection, to identify these patterns. For example, when you feel an intense emotion, fear, shame, or anger, pause and ask, which part of me is feeling this? Is this the child inside me responding to an old wound? Recognition allows you to separate past experiences from present reality. It is the foundation of inner child work. 2. Nurturing and validating the child. Once the inner child is recognized, the next step is validation. This involves acknowledging the child's feelings, experiences, and needs without judgment. Imagine a small child who is dismissed for crying. As an adult, you might say internally, "I see you. I hear your pain. It was not your fault." Validation communicates safety and understanding, helping the inner child feel seen and accepted for the first time in years. Therapists often recommend visualization exercises. Picture your younger self in a safe, comforting space and offer reassurance, comfort, and protection. This practice rewires emotional responses and restores trust in yourself. 3. Rewriting negative beliefs. Much of inner child trauma is stored in beliefs about self-worth. Many adults carry unconscious messages like, "I am not enough," or "I must always please others to be loved." Healing requires consciously challenging and rewriting these beliefs. One approach is to create affirmations that directly counter old patterns. For instance, "I am worthy of love and care. My feelings matter. Asterisk, I am safe and capable." Repeating these statements, especially during moments of stress or self-doubt, gradually replaces the old, internalized messages with ones rooted in self-compassion and truth. 4. Therapeutic approaches. Several evidence-based therapeutic methods support inner child healing. Some of the most effective include inner child work, a guided process in therapy or self-reflection where adults dialogue with their inner child, offering reassurance, empathy, and understanding. EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, helps process and reduce the emotional intensity of past traumatic memories. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, identifies and changes distorted thought patterns rooted in childhood experiences. Mindfulness practices, techniques like meditation, body scans, or breathwork help regulate emotional responses and create present moment awareness. Healing is not about erasing the past. It's about integrating those experiences in a way that empowers rather than limits you. 5. Healthy boundaries and self-care. A vital part of healing. The inner child is learning healthy boundaries and self-care. Many adults with childhood trauma struggle to assert needs or protect themselves, having been conditioned to prioritize others or suppress emotions. Self-care is more than spa days or relaxation. It is actively protecting your emotional, mental, and physical well-being. This might mean saying no when necessary, seeking supportive relationships, or creating routines that nurture emotional safety. By practicing boundaries and self-care, the inner child learns that it is worthy of protection and respect. 6. Creative expression and play. The inner child thrives on creativity and play, which were often restricted or discouraged during trauma-filled childhoods. Activities like drawing, writing, dancing, or even playful physical activities reconnect adults with joy, curiosity, and self-expression. Engaging in creative play is not indulgent, it is healing. It allows suppressed emotions to surface safely, fosters self-discovery, and strengthens the connection with the inner child. 7. The role of community and support. While inner child work is personal, community and support play a crucial role. Sharing experiences with trusted friends, mentors, or support groups validates the journey and reminds the inner child that it is not alone. Professional guidance, such as therapists specializing in trauma or inner child healing, can provide tools, accountability, and safe space to process difficult memories. Healing thrives in environments of empathy, patience, and understanding. External support mirrors the internal support the child has longed for. To summarize, Healing the inner child involves several interconnected steps. 1. Recognition, identifying patterns, emotions, and triggers linked to childhood trauma. 2. Validation, acknowledging the inner child's feelings and experiences. 3. Rewriting beliefs, replacing negative, internalized messages with affirming truths. 4. Therapeutic techniques, using evidence-based methods like inner child work, EMDR, CBT, and MINDFULNESS. 5. Boundaries and self-care, protecting emotional and physical well-being. 6. Creative expression, engaging in play and creativity to restore joy and curiosity. 7. Community support, connecting with supportive networks and professionals. Each of these steps helps the inner child feel safe, valued, and seen. Healing is a gradual journey, requiring patience and compassion, but it is possible and transformative. In our next episode, we will explore real-life stories of healing, how individuals have reclaimed their inner child, transformed their lives, and developed resilience. Through these stories, we'll witness the power of acknowledging pain, nurturing oneself, and creating a life rooted in compassion and authenticity. Part 5. Stories of healing. We've spent time understanding the causes of inner child trauma, its long-term effects, and practical ways to begin healing. Today, we turn our attention to real-life stories of healing, stories that illustrate the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of inner child work. Hearing these stories allows us to see not only the pain, but also the possibility of growth, self-compassion, and emotional freedom. Story 1. Healing through acknowledgement. Consider a person we'll call Alex. Growing up, Alex experienced bullying in school and emotional neglect at home. As an adult, Alex struggled with self-doubt, chronic anxiety, and the belief that their feelings were unimportant. Through therapy, Alex began to identify the inner child, that small, anxious child still hiding in fear of rejection. Alex practiced validation exercises, speaking gently to this inner child. I see you. Your feelings are important. You are safe now. Over months, this practice helped Alex notice when past triggers influenced adult reactions. Patterns of overwork, perfectionism, and people-pleasing began to soften. Alex learned that acknowledging and listening to the inner child was not indulgent. It was transformative. The simple act of validation opened the door to trust, self-compassion, and emotional resilience. Another example is Sam. Sam grew up in a household where emotions were dismissed and expressing oneself was discouraged. As a teenager, Sam buried feelings and learned to suppress creativity. During healing, Sam was encouraged to reconnect with play and creativity, painting, writing, and improvisational movement. This creative expression became a form of emotional release, allowing buried feelings to surface safely. Psychologists often emphasize that play and creativity are not just hobbies, they are powerful tools for reconnecting with the inner child. For Sam, painting a visual diary of emotions became a daily ritual. Over time, the inner child that once felt silenced found voice, confidence, and joy. Emotional healing was no longer abstract. It was tangible, visible, and deeply restorative. Story 3. Healing through boundaries and relationships. Jade's story highlights the role of relationships and boundaries. Jade grew up in a family where personal needs were ignored. As an adult, she found herself in toxic relationships, repeating patterns of self-sacrifice and emotional invisibility. Through therapy and self-reflection, Jade learned to set healthy boundaries and prioritize her own emotional needs. She began saying no to people and situations that felt unsafe, creating space for emotional safety. This practice strengthened her sense of self-worth and allowed the inner child to feel seen and protected. The psychological concept here is simple. When the inner child feels safe, adult behaviors shift. Emotional resilience, self-trust, and healthy relationships emerge naturally. Story 4. Healing through mindfulness and self-compassion. Finally, let's look at Jordan. Jordan experienced early loss and repeated feelings of abandonment. As an adult, Jordan carried persistent self-blame and fear of intimacy. Mindfulness exercises, such as meditation and guided self-compassion, became Jordan's tools for reconnecting with the inner child. By noticing emotions without judgment, Jordan learned to respond to the child's needs rather than repeating reactive patterns. Studies in psychology show that mindfulness helps regulate emotions, reduce anxiety, and integrate early experiences. For Jordan, daily reflection and compassionate self-talk transformed relationships, emotional regulation, and even career decisions. Healing was a journey, not an event, but progress was measurable, internal, and profoundly freeing. These stories share common threads. Asterisk 1. Recognition. Each person acknowledged the presence of the inner child. 2. Validation. They provided space for emotions and experiences to be recognized. 3. Practical tools. Therapy, mindfulness, creative expression, and boundaries became vehicles for healing. 4. Integration. Healing required integrating past experiences without erasing them, transforming trauma into resilience. Inner child trauma can feel overwhelming, but these stories demonstrate a universal truth. Healing is possible, and the inner child is capable of profound resilience when nurtured. By combining awareness, validation, creative expression, boundaries, and mindfulness, adults can reclaim their emotional freedom and foster healthier relationships with themselves and others. Each step strengthens the bond with the inner child, creating a foundation for lifelong growth, self-compassion, and emotional well-being. In our final episode, we will reflect on the journey we've taken from understanding trauma and its causes, to exploring long-term effects, and finally to stories of healing. We will provide actionable guidance to continue nurturing the inner child and leave you with a sense of hope and empowerment for your own journey. Part 6. Reflection and action. We've traveled a long journey together, from understanding the inner child and its wounds, to exploring the causes of trauma, the long-term effects, and finally, stories of healing. We've laid out both the why and the how of inner child work. Today, we pause to reflect, integrate, and take actionable steps toward nurturing the child within. Healing is a journey, not a destination, but each step forward creates a ripple of transformation in our emotional lives. 1. Reflection. Understanding your journey. Begin with reflection. Look back on your own experiences. What early moments or patterns might have shaped your inner child. When do you notice the child's voice surfacing in your emotions, fears, or behaviors? How have these patterns influenced your relationships, decisions, and self-image? Psychologists call this self-observation or mindful awareness. It doesn't require judgment or self-criticism, only recognition. By reflecting on our experiences with curiosity and compassion, we create the foundation for healing. 2. Action step. Acknowledge and validate the inner child once you've reflected. Begin the practice of acknowledgement and validation. This is the heart of inner child work. Try a simple exercise. Close your eyes and picture yourself as a child at a moment when you felt hurt, scared, or overlooked. Speak to them with compassion. I see you. I hear you. You're safe now. You are not alone. Offer reassurance that the feelings they experienced were valid and that they deserve care and love. This practice may feel awkward at first, but repeated acknowledgement helps retrain the nervous system, allowing the inner child to feel seen and protected. 3. Action step. Rewriting negative patterns next. Focus on rewriting negative beliefs and behaviors formed in childhood. Ask yourself, which thoughts do I carry that are rooted in my childhood experiences? How might these thoughts be outdated or inaccurate today? What positive beliefs can I adopt to replace them? Examples of affirmations include, I am enough just as I am. My feelings are valid. I am capable of love and connection. Pair these affirmations with mindful awareness whenever you notice old patterns of self-criticism, anxiety, or fear. Over time, the inner child absorbs these new positive messages. 4. Action step. Creative expression and play. The inner child thrives on creativity and play, often stifled in trauma. Engage in activities that spark curiosity and joy. Drawing, painting or journaling, music, dance or singing, outdoor play, sports, or imaginative activities. Creative expression allows suppressed emotions to surface safely and helps the inner child reclaim a sense of freedom and delight. Healing is not only about processing pain, it's about rediscovering joy and curiosity that may have been lost. 5. Action step. Building support and community. Healing is strengthened by supportive relationships. This could be friends, mentors, therapists, or support groups. Seek connections with people who validate your experiences. Share your reflections and progress with someone trustworthy. Consider professional guidance if you encounter particularly intense trauma responses. Support is not a crutch. It is the mirror the inner child needs to feel seen, safe, and loved. 6. Daily practices for integration to maintain progress. Consider integrating small, consistent practices. Daily journaling, reflect on feelings and experiences, and write messages of care to your inner child. Mindful check-ins. Pause during the day to ask, how is my inner child feeling right now? Affirmation rituals. Begin or end your day with positive self-talk. Intentional play. Dedicate time to activities that spark joy and curiosity. These practices transform awareness into action, creating lasting patterns of self-compassion and resilience. To summarize this series, 1. Understanding the inner child helps us recognize the source of emotional patterns. 2. Causes of trauma, bullying, neglect, violence, loss. Societal pressures shape emotional, cognitive, and relational behaviors. 3. Long-term effects can appear as anxiety, self-doubt, attachment challenges, or physical stress responses. 4. Healing is possible through acknowledgement, validation, therapy, mindfulness, creative expression, boundaries, and supportive relationships. 5. Actionable daily practices sustain emotional growth and nurture the inner child over time. Your inner child, though wounded, is resilient. By listening, validating, and caring for this part of yourself, you are rewriting your story, not erasing the past, but transforming it into a source of strength, wisdom, and compassion. The journey may take time, and it may not always be linear, but every step of recognition, care, and action brings you closer to emotional freedom, wholeness, and the joy that was always meant to be yours. Thank you for joining this journey. May you continue to nurture your inner child, embrace your resilience, and step into each day with curiosity, compassion, and courage. Creative expression allows suppressed emotions to surface safely and helps the inner child reclaim a sense of freedom and delight. Healing is not only about processing pain, it's about rediscovering joy and curiosity that may have been lost. 5. Action step. Building support and community. Healing is strengthened by supportive relationships. This could be friends, mentors, therapists, or support groups. Asterisk. Seek connections with people who validate your experiences. Asterisk. Share your reflections and progress with someone trustworthy. Asterisk. Consider professional guidance if you encounter particularly intense trauma responses. Support is not a crutch. It is the mirror the inner child needs to feel seen, safe, and loved. 6. Daily practices for integration narrator. To maintain progress, consider integrating small, consistent practices. Asterisk daily journaling. Reflect on feelings and experiences. And write messages of care to your inner child. Asterisk mindful check-ins. Pause during the day to ask, how is my inner child feeling right now? Affirmation rituals. Begin or end your day with positive self-talk. Asterisk intentional play. Dedicate time to activities that spark joy and curiosity. These practices transform awareness into action, creating lasting patterns of self-compassion and resilience. To summarize this series, 1. Understanding the inner child helps us recognize the source of emotional patterns. 2. Causes of trauma, bullying, neglect, violence, loss. Societal pressures shape emotional, cognitive, and relational behaviors. 3. Long-term effects can appear as anxiety, self-doubt, attachment challenges, or physical stress responses. 4. Healing is possible through acknowledgement, validation, therapy, mindfulness, creative expression, boundaries, and supportive relationships. 5. Actionable daily practices sustain emotional growth and nurture the inner child over time. Your inner child, though wounded, is resilient. By listening, validating, and caring for this part of yourself, you are rewriting your story, not erasing the past, but transforming it into a source of strength, wisdom, and compassion. The journey may take time, and it may not always be linear, but every step of recognition, care, and action brings you closer to emotional freedom, wholeness, and the joy that was always meant to be yours. Thank you for joining this journey. May you continue to nurture your inner child, embrace your resilience, and step into each day with curiosity, compassion, and courage.